The emergency lights bathed Calrex Station in crimson as Ambassador Thexelar stood before the Galactic Council. His 4 eyes swept across the assembled representatives from 17 different civilizations, each one showing the same expression that transcended species boundaries: fear. The Vryn swarm has entered the Viridian sector, Thexelar announced, his voice steady despite the tremor in his primary hands. They will reach this station in 4 hours. The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted in dozens of languages, their translation devices struggling to keep pace. A Keltharian delegate collapsed, her crystalline body structure dimming with shock. The Morphid ambassador simply froze, his gelatinous form going completely still. Commander Zilrith stepped forward, his scales rattling in the way his people showed stress. He activated the central holographic display and the room fell silent. The Vryn fleet appeared in sickening detail. 247 vessels of various sizes, all covered in the distinctive black crystalline armor that had become the symbol of galactic doom. In the past 2 months, the Vryn have consumed 3 civilizations, Zilrith began, his voice flat and professional. The Torth Collective, the Benari Unity, the worlds of Kelm, 17 billion souls converted into raw materials, their planet stripped to the core. He manipulated the display showing battle recordings. The Council watched as proud warships fired their most powerful weapons at the Vryn vessels. The energy beams struck the black crystals and simply stopped, absorbed into the adaptive shielding. Then the Vryn returned fire, and entire fleets disappeared in blossoms of nuclear fire. Every weapon we have tried has failed, Zilrith continued. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, graviton beams, even experimental temporal disruptors. The Vryn adapt within seconds. They learn, they evolve, and then they destroy. A young Pandari representative raised her hand, her feathers bristling with agitation. What about evacuation? We must flee. Zilrith's expression was grim. Our fastest vessels require 6 hours to reach minimum safe distance. We have 4 hours. The mathematics are simple and brutal. Thexelar watched hope drain from the room. He had been a diplomat for 40 cycles, had negotiated peace between species that had warred for millennia, had helped build the very council that now faced extinction. All that work, all that progress, about to end in 4 hours. Dr. Melsina, the Velkorian xenohistorian, was frantically working at her personal terminal, her tentacles moving in a blur across the holographic interface. She had been unusually quiet during the briefing, and Thexelar noticed her growing agitation. The Vryn were not always autonomous, a Morphid scholar observed, his voice carrying the weight of ancient knowledge. They were weapons created by the progenitors millions of years ago. Something has awakened them. Something has given them purpose again. What purpose? Someone asked. Harvest, Zilrith answered. They collect resources. Matter, energy, information. They take everything and give nothing back. They are the ultimate predators and we are simply food. The chamber's atmosphere grew heavier. Some representatives were already sending final messages to their homeworlds. Others sat in stunned silence. A few prayed to their various gods, though Thexelar wondered if any deity could stand against the Vryn. Suddenly alarms blared throughout the station. The main display flickered and changed, showing a new contact on the edge of the solar system. Unidentified vessel, the station's AI announced in its calm, infuriating voice. Unknown configuration, scanning. Unable to match with any known civilization database. The ship was small compared to the Vryn dreadnoughts, roughly the size of a heavy cruiser by galactic standards. Its design was strange, all angular edges and practical construction, with none of the elegant curves or artistic flourishes that most civilizations favored in their vessels. It looked brutal and efficient, like something designed by engineers who cared only about function. They're broadcasting, a communications officer reported, on ancient emergency frequencies. The message is odd. It's just one word repeated: human. The word meant nothing to most of the council. A few representatives checked their databases and found nothing. But Dr. Melsina suddenly went rigid, all her tentacles freezing in mid-motion. No, she whispered. That's impossible. What is impossible? Thexelar demanded. Melsina looked up from her terminal, her large eyes wide with something between terror and hope. Humans. I've found references in the oldest archives, the ones sealed under quarantine protocols. There was a species called humans, contacted approximately 400 years ago during the 5th expansion. And, Zilreth prompted, his military mind already cataloging potential threats. They were isolated, quarantined. The records are heavily redacted, but the few fragments I can access suggest they were considered dangerous. Not because they attacked anyone, but because of their thinking, the way they approached problems, the way they fought. One ship, a delegate scoffed. Even if these humans are great warriors, one ship cannot stop the Vryn when 17 species could not. The mysterious vessel was moving now, accelerating toward the inner system at speeds that made the sensor technicians double-check their readings. It was fast, far faster than it should be for a ship of that mass. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced. The main display shifted, showing the interior of the human ship's bridge. A woman sat in the command chair, appearing to be middle-aged by human standards, with dark hair tied back and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore a simple uniform, dark blue with minimal decoration. Behind her, other humans worked at various stations, and what struck Thexalar immediately was their demeanor. They were calm, almost casual. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Human Space Vessel Indomitable," the woman said, her voice clear and confident. "We've been monitoring your situation. We're here to help." Thexalar found his voice. "Captain Chen, I am Ambassador Thexalar. I must warn you. The Vryn fleet approaching this station has destroyed everything sent against it. Engaging them would be suicide." Chen smiled, and it was not a comforting expression. It was the smile of someone who knew something others did not, who held cards they had yet to reveal. "With respect, Ambassador, you've been fighting them wrong. We've had 400 years to think about this problem. 400 years of isolation, preparation, and planning. We've studied the Vryn, analyzed every battle, run 10,000 simulations." She leaned forward slightly. "We know how to kill them." Zilreth stepped closer to the screen. 17 civilizations have tried. Each one believed they had the answer. Each one was wrong. "They were thinking like prey," Chen replied. "Reacting. Adapting to the Vryn's adaptations, always one step behind. Humans learned a long time ago that the best way to win a fight is to hit so hard and so fast that your enemy never gets a chance to adapt." The Indomitable was accelerating harder now, pushing toward the approaching Vryn fleet at velocities that should have torn the ship apart from the stress, yet it held together, solid and inexorable. "We're 3 hours from Vryn weapons range," Chen said. "I'm moving to intercept. I suggest you start recording, Ambassador. Your civilization is about to witness something that hasn't been seen in 400 years. Humans at war. Watch and learn." The transmission ended. The council chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Dr. Melsina spoke, her voice trembling. "I found something else in the archives. A fragment, barely readable. It was a message from the team that first contacted humanity." She paused, her tentacles curling with anxiety. It said, "Recommend immediate quarantine. Not for our protection, for theirs. If they ever apply their full creativity to warfare, nothing in the galaxy will be able to stop them." Outside, the single human ship raced toward 247 Vryn vessels, and somewhere in the distance, Captain Sarah Chen was counting down to what she promised would be a very short war. The Vryn fleet moved through space like a spreading plague. 247 vessels, ranging from frigates the size of small moons to dreadnoughts that could be seen from planetary surfaces. Their black crystalline armor caught and absorbed light, making them look like holes torn in the fabric of space itself. On Krex station, every screen showed the same view, the approaching doom and the single human ship racing to meet it. The Indomitable looked absurdly small against the Vryn armada, like a minnow swimming toward a school of sharks. Commander Zilreth stood at the tactical station, his scales still rattling with stress. He had pulled up every scrap of data he could find on human vessels, which amounted to almost nothing. The design was strange, all function over form, with weapons ports that seemed excessive even by military standards. The ship bristled with different types of armaments, as if the designers could not decide on a single weapons system and simply installed everything. "They're hailing us again," the communications officer reported. Captain Chen reappeared on screen. Behind her, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency. One of them was laughing at something, actually laughing, with death approaching at relativistic speeds. The disconnect between their mood and the situation was disturbing. Ambassador Thexelar, Chen said, I need you to transmit all tactical data on the Vrin. Shield frequencies, weapon types, movement patterns, everything you have. Of course, Thexelar replied, gesturing to his aides. But Captain, I must ask again that you reconsider. One ship cannot win? Chen interrupted, not unkindly. Ambassador, do you know what humans learned from our own history? We learned that overwhelming force applied decisively can change the outcome of any conflict. We also learned that if you're going to fight, you don't fight fair. You fight to win so completely that no one ever wants to fight you again. Data streamed from Krex station to the Indomitable. Zilrith watched the transmission rates and frowned. The human ship was processing information faster than should be possible, running calculations that would take standard quantum computers hours to complete. Tactical data received and analyzed, Chen said after barely a minute. Yes, I see why you've been having trouble. You've been using energy weapons almost exclusively. The Vrin shields are designed to absorb and redistribute energy. You're feeding them. We've tried kinetic weapons, Zilrith interjected. Missiles, railguns, mass drivers. The Vrin point defense systems destroy them before impact. Chen's smile returned. You tried kinetic weapons at sublight speeds. We're going to try something different. She turned to someone off-screen. Lieutenant Park, how long until we're in range? 4 minutes, Captain, a male voice responded. 4 minutes, Chen repeated, facing the screen again. Watch closely, Ambassador. You're about to see what 400 years of paranoid preparation looks like. The transmission did not end this time. Chen left the channel open, allowing the Council to watch as the Indomitable approached the Vrin fleet. Dr. Melsina had pulled up her own displays, comparing the human ship's energy signature to galactic standards. This is impossible, she muttered, her tentacles moving frantically over the controls. Their power output is 3 times what a ship that size should generate. The reactor must be, stars above, they're using controlled antimatter annihilation. That technology was banned after the Helios incident. Banned for everyone except humans, apparently, Thexelar observed quietly. The Vrin had detected the Indomitable now. The massive fleet began to shift, dozens of vessels turning their weapons toward the approaching human ship. The Vrin did not communicate, did not negotiate. They simply prepared to destroy. 60 seconds, Lieutenant Park announced calmly. On the Indomitable's bridge, someone was playing music, classical music, from Earth with violins and cellos creating a melody that was somehow both beautiful and ominous. Chen sat relaxed in her command chair, fingers tapping in rhythm with the music. Captain, they're targeting us, another voice reported, reading massive energy buildups across the Vrin front line. Let them, Chen replied. Shields to maximum. Prepare weapon systems Alpha through Omega. Alpha through Omega, Zilrith repeated. How many weapon systems do you have? Chen glanced at the screen. 17 primary systems, each with multiple subsystems. We believe in redundancy, Commander. If one weapon fails, we have 16 others ready to go. The Vrin fired first. Dozens of energy beams lanced across space, each one powerful enough to vaporize a small asteroid. They converged on the Indomitable in a display of destructive force that made several council members look away. The beams struck the human ship's shields and stopped. The energy scattered across a barrier that suddenly became visible, glowing blue-white with absorbed power. But the shield did not just absorb the energy. It redirected it, collecting the Vrin's own weapons, fire and channeling, it into a single focus beam that shot back at the attackers. 3 Vrin frigates exploded as their own. Weapons energy was returned to them amplified and focused. The Vrin fleet hesitated, which was unusual. They were learning machines, constantly adapting, but this tactic seemed to confuse them. 30 seconds, Park announced. All weapons armed and ready. Target solutions locked on 247 vessels, another crew member added. Wait, Chen said calmly, still tapping her fingers to the music. Let them commit. The Vrin fired again, this time with even more vessels, more energy, a concentrated barrage meant to overwhelm any defense. The Indomitable's shields flared brightly, absorbing terawatts of power. Warning alarms began to sound on the human bridge. Shields at 80%, someone reported. 70%. 60. Now, Chen said softly, what happened next would be studied by military academies for generations. The Indomitable did not slow down, did not maneuver defensively. It accelerated directly into the Vrin formation, while simultaneously deploying what Chen had called kinetic penetrators. They were not missiles. They were solid tungsten rods, each one weighing several tons, accelerated to 95% of light speed by magnetic rails built into the Indomitable's hull. At that velocity, mass became a weapon more devastating than any explosive. The first rod struck a Vryn cruiser amidships. The ship did not explode. It simply ceased to exist in any recognizable form, converted instantly into an expanding cloud of superheated plasma. The second rod punched through a dreadnought's shields as if they were not there, because the Vryn shields were designed to deflect energy, not relativistic mass. The dreadnought broke apart, its spine shattered. More rods fired, dozens of them, each finding a target with computer-guided precision. Vryn vessels died faster than they could adapt, faster than their learning algorithms could compensate. 90 seconds, Park said, his voice still calm despite the carnage unfolding around them. The Vryn tried to adapt. Some vessels activated emergency thrusters, attempting to scatter and present harder targets. Others tried to self-replicate, beginning the process of building new ships from stored raw materials to replace their losses. Chen had anticipated this. She gave another order, and the Indomitable deployed what she called cascade mines. They were small devices, hardly larger than a human fist, but each one contained a quantum state manipulator that could detect and exploit the universal constant of physics that powered the Vryn reactors. The mines spread through the Vryn formation like seeds in the wind. When they activated, they created chain reactions in the Vryn power cores. The ancient machines had built their energy systems on fundamental principles of physics, principles that could not be adapted or changed because they were universal laws. The humans had found those laws and weaponized them. 30 more Vryn vessels exploded from within, their own reactors turning against them. 2 minutes, Park announced. 150 Vryn ships remained. They were learning now, truly learning, beginning to adapt their formation and tactics. But learning takes time, and time was something they did not have. The Indomitable fired everything. Lasers, plasma cannons, missile swarms, particle beams, gravity weapons, and devices that bent space itself. 17 different weapon systems, each exploiting different principles of physics, each requiring different adaptations. The Vryn could not adapt to all of them simultaneously. It was overkill on a scale the galaxy had never witnessed. The humans were not trying to win efficiently. They were trying to win so decisively that the very concept of fighting them would become unthinkable. 3 minutes, Park said. 60 Vryn vessels left now, trying desperately to retreat, to escape to faster-than-light speeds and flee this nightmare. But Chen had prepared for that too. The Indomitable deployed a gravity snare, a localized distortion in space-time that prevented FTL travel within a massive sphere around the battle. The Vryn were trapped, and Captain Sarah Chen was merciless. Full spectrum engagement, she ordered quietly. The last Vryn vessels died in a storm of fire and physics. At 3 minutes and 47 seconds, the battle ended. Where 247 Vryn ships had been, there was now only debris and fading energy signatures. The Indomitable floated alone in the silence of space, damaged but intact, victorious and terrible. On Krex station, the Council watched in absolute silence. The silence in the Galactic Council chamber stretched for what felt like an eternity. Representatives from 17 civilizations stared at the displays showing the aftermath of the battle. Where the Vryn fleet had been, there was now only an expanding field of debris, glowing wreckage, and the fading energy signatures of 247 destroyed vessels. The Indomitable hung in space, its hull scarred and scorched but fundamentally intact. Small repair drones emerged from its bays, already beginning to patch the damage. Even the human ship's recovery process seemed efficient and practiced, as if they had planned for exactly this outcome. Ambassador Thexalar realized he had been holding his breath. His forehands trembled slightly as he released the edge of the console he had been gripping. Around him, other council members showed similar signs of shock. The Caltharian delegate's crystalline body structure was flickering with confused colors. The Morphid ambassador had spread himself thin across his seat, a sign of complete overwhelm in his species. Commander Zilreth stared at the tactical display, his scales no longer rattling but frozen in place. His entire understanding of warfare, built over decades of military service, had just been demolished in less than 4 minutes. He had studied every battle against the Vryn, analyzed every tactic, and concluded that they were unbeatable. He had been wrong. Not slightly wrong. Catastrophically wrong. How? He whispered, not really asking anyone in particular. How is that possible? Dr. Melsina was frantically reviewing her findings, her tentacles moving across multiple holographic displays simultaneously. They didn't just fight the Vryn, she said, her voice filled with academic wonder despite the violence they had just witnessed. They fought the concept of the Vryn. Every weapon system attacked a different vulnerability. They assumed the Vryn would adapt and prepared counters to the adaptations. They were fighting 3 moves ahead. That's not tactics, Zilreth said, finally finding his voice. That's not strategy. That's something else entirely. That's human, Melsina replied softly. The communication system activated again. Captain Chen appeared on screen and Thexalar noticed details he had missed before. There was a thin cut above her left eyebrow, probably from debris during the battle. Her uniform had scorch marks on one shoulder. She looked tired now, the adrenaline wearing off, but her eyes were still sharp and focused. Calrex Station, this is Captain Chen. The Vryn threat has been neutralized. We're detecting no additional hostile contacts in the sector. You're safe. Captain Chen, Thexalar began, then paused, unsure what to even say. Thank you seemed inadequate. What you did should be impossible seemed rude. Finally, he settled on, we owe you a debt beyond measure. Chen shook her head. You don't owe us anything, Ambassador. We're all part of the same galaxy. When one civilization is threatened, we're all threatened. That's something humans learned the hard way, and it's why we've come back. Come back? Thexalar repeated. Perhaps we should discuss this in person, Chen suggested. With your permission, I'd like to dock at Calrex Station. We have much to talk about. 2 hours later, Captain Sarah Chen walked through the corridors of Calrex Station with 4 of her crew members. The station's inhabitants watched them pass with expressions ranging from awe to fear. Humans were shorter than many galactic species, built more compactly, but there was something in the way they moved that suggested coiled energy, readiness, potential violence held carefully in check. The council had assembled in a smaller, more private chamber. This was not the grand hall where official pronouncements were made, but a conference room designed for honest discussion. Thexalar had decided formality could wait. They needed answers. Chen sat across from the council members, her posture relaxed but alert. Her crew stood behind her, 3 men and 1 woman, all of them carrying themselves with the same quiet confidence their captain displayed. 400 years ago, Chen began without preamble. Humanity made first contact with the galactic community. It did not go well. The records are heavily redacted, Dr. Melsina said. I can only access fragments. The records are redacted because humanity asked for them to be, Chen explained. Not because we attacked anyone or committed crimes, but because of what we represented. We were young, aggressive, creative in ways that made the established civilizations uncomfortable. We thought differently. We solved problems differently. And when the concept of galactic threats was explained to us, we became obsessed. She leaned forward slightly. The liaison officer who first contacted us mentioned, almost casually, that there were ancient weapons sleeping in the galaxy. Old machines from forgotten wars. The Vryn were one example. There were others. Most galactic civilizations had simply accepted this as a fact of life, something to avoid and hope never awakened. That's a reasonable approach, Zilreth said defensively. It's a naive approach, Chen countered, not unkindly. Humans have a saying, hope is not a strategy. When we learned about these threats, we didn't hope they would stay asleep. We assumed they would wake up and began preparing for that day. Thexalar was beginning to understand. The quarantine. It was your idea. It was our request, Chen confirmed. We asked the galactic community to leave us alone for a few centuries. We took our colony worlds, our resources, and we built. We researched. We prepared. Every human endeavor for 400 years has been focused on one question. How do we survive in a galaxy filled with threats that could end our species? That's paranoid, someone muttered. Chen smiled, but there was no humor in it. Humans have a long history of paranoia being proven correct. We prepared for the Vryn. We prepared for things worse than the Vryn. We built a military doctrine based on a single principle, overwhelming force applied with absolute precision. If we fight to win so decisively that the enemy never gets a second chance. She activated a holographic display, showing images that made several council members gasp. Orbital dockyards around Earth and dozens of colony worlds, each one filled with ships. Hundreds of vessels. Thousands. Ships ranging from frigates to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed even the largest Vryn vessels. The Indomitable is a scout ship, Chen said quietly. It's one of the smallest vessels in the human defense fleet. It's designed for reconnaissance and first contact scenarios. What you witnessed today was a light engagement by human standards. The implications settled over the council like a heavy blanket. Zilrith felt something he had not felt in years. Genuine fear. Not of the Vryn, but of humanity. One scout ship had destroyed a fleet that had consumed civilizations. What could their full military accomplish? You're afraid of us now, Chen observed, reading the room accurately. That's natural. But understand this. Humanity doesn't want to conquer anyone. We don't want to dominate. We spent 400 years in isolation not because we enjoy being alone, but because we were terrified of what we might become if we didn't prepare properly. What do you mean? Thexalar asked. Chen's expression grew somber. Humanity has a dark history, Ambassador. We've fought ourselves more brutally than most species fight their enemies. We've committed atrocities, genocides, holocausts. We know what we're capable of when we're desperate or afraid. So when we learned about galactic threats, we made a choice. We would become strong enough to protect ourselves and others, but we would never become conquerors. Power without wisdom is tyranny, and we've had enough tyrants in our history. She gestured to the images of the fleet. Every ship you see has multiple layers of control. No single person can launch an attack. No single world can declare war. Humanity governs itself through consensus now, and that consensus is clear. We will defend, but we will not attack. We will protect, but we will not oppress. Dr. Melsina spoke up, her voice thoughtful. The archives mentioned weaponized creativity, that you think about problems in ways that other species don't. It's true, Chen acknowledged. Humans are not the strongest species. We're not the fastest or the smartest, but we're persistent, creative, and we refuse to accept that any problem is unsolvable. When faced with the Vryn, other species tried to match them, to adapt to their adaptations. We asked a different question. What if we attack from so many directions simultaneously that adaptation becomes impossible? Overkill, Zilrith said, finally understanding. You don't just want to win. You want to overwhelm. Exactly. If you're going to fight, end it quickly and completely. Don't give your enemy time to learn, to adapt, to counter. Hit them with everything at once from angles they didn't know existed, using principles they can't defend against. Thexalar considered this carefully. Why reveal yourselves now? You could have remained hidden, safe behind your quarantine. Chen's expression grew grave. Because the Vryn didn't wake up by themselves. Something activated them. We've been monitoring deep space for decades, and we've detected anomalies in the galactic core. Energy signatures. Movement patterns. Something ancient and powerful is stirring. Something that makes the Vryn look like children's toys. The council chamber went quiet. The relief of surviving the Vryn evaporated, replaced by new dread. The Vryn were a test, Chen continued. A probe sent to evaluate the galaxy's defenses. We passed the test barely because humanity intervened. But the real threat is still out there, and it's coming. You'll need us. And honestly, 3 weeks had passed since the Battle of Krex Station, as it was now being called across the galaxy. 3 weeks since Captain Sarah Chen and the Indomitable had destroyed the Vryn fleet in less than 4 minutes. 3 weeks since humanity had announced its return to galactic affairs. The news had spread faster than light, carried by quantum communication relays to every corner of civilized space. Reactions varied wildly. Some species celebrated humanity as saviors. Others viewed them with suspicion and fear. A few called for immediate defensive measures against what they saw as a new threat. But no one could deny that everything had changed. On Krex Station, Ambassador Thexalar stood in his private office reviewing the latest reports. The room was filled with holographic displays, each showing different aspects of the rapidly evolving situation. Trade agreements, technology transfers, military consultations, cultural exchanges. In 3 weeks, humanity had become the most discussed topic in galactic history. Dr. Melsina entered without knocking, a privilege Thexalar granted only to close colleagues. Her tentacles carried multiple data tablets, and her large eyes showed excitement mixed with exhaustion. "I finished my analysis of the battle recordings," she announced, placing the tablets on his desk. "Ambassador, what we witnessed was even more remarkable than we initially realized." "How so?" Thexalar asked, gesturing for her to continue. Melsina activated one of the displays, showing a frame-by-frame breakdown of the battle. The humans didn't just attack the Vryn. They conducted a real-time analysis during the engagement, testing multiple theoretical approaches simultaneously. Every weapon system they deployed was gathering data, learning about the Vryn even while destroying them. She zoomed in on specific moments. "Look here. The first kinetic strike deliberately targeted a less critical ship. Why? To observe how the Vryn fleet would react. Then they adjusted their targeting pattern based on that reaction. And here, when they deployed the Cascade mines, they used 3 different quantum frequencies to determine which would be most effective. They were experimenting," Thexalar said, understanding dawning. "Even in combat, they were learning." "Exactly. And that's what makes humanity so dangerous and so valuable. They never stop learning, never stop adapting. Other species develop a successful tactic and repeat it. Humans develop a successful tactic and immediately start thinking about how to improve it." A chime indicated an incoming communication. Thexalar accepted it, and Commander Zilreth appeared on the screen. The military commander looked different now, his scales showing colors Thexalar had never seen before. It took a moment to realize what they indicated. Excitement. "Ambassador, you need to come to the Military Coordination Center," Zilreth said without preamble. "The humans are conducting a training session with our defense forces. You have to see this." 20 minutes later, Thexalar and Melsina entered the Military Coordination Center. It was a large space filled with holographic displays and simulation equipment, normally used to train officers in tactical situations. Today, it was packed with military personnel from a dozen different species, all watching a demonstration with rapt attention. Captain Chen stood at the center, but she was not the one speaking. A younger human, introduced as Lieutenant Commander Marcus Rivera, was addressing the assembled officers. He looked barely old enough to be in the military by galactic standards, but his eyes held the kind of sharp intelligence that transcended age. "The fundamental problem with your defensive strategies," Rivera was saying, gesturing at a holographic display, "is that you're reactive. You wait for the enemy to attack, then you respond. This puts you permanently on the back foot." A Keltharian officer raised a crystalline appendage. "But that is the nature of defense. You cannot attack what you do not know is coming. Can't you?" Rivera asked, smiling. "Let me show you something we call predictive defense. It's based on a human concept called game theory. You don't wait for the enemy to move. You calculate all possible moves they could make, prepare responses for each one, and then you control the battlefield in a way that limits their options." He manipulated the display, showing a simulation of a defensive position. "Traditional thinking. Put your strongest shields facing the most likely attack vector. Human thinking. Make every attack vector equally dangerous for the enemy. They don't know where you're weak, because you're not weak anywhere. Better yet, you create false weak points, traps that look vulnerable but are actually kill zones." Zilreth was watching the demonstration with intense focus. He caught Thexalar's eye and gestured him over. 3 weeks, Ambassador," Zilreth said quietly. "I've learned more in 3 weeks than in 20 years of military academy. The humans don't just teach tactics, they teach a completely different way of thinking about conflict." "And that doesn't concern you?" Thexalar asked. "That they're this good at warfare?" "It terrifies me," Zilreth admitted. "But I'm more terrified of what's coming from the Galactic Core. We need them, Ambassador. We need their knowledge, their perspective, their willingness to ask questions that make us uncomfortable." Across the station, in the Cultural Exchange Center, a very different kind of integration was taking place. Human civilians had begun arriving, scholars and artists and scientists eager to reconnect with the galactic community. They filled the center with an energy that was almost overwhelming. Dr. Yan Wei, a human xenoanthropologist, was giving a presentation on human culture to a mixed audience of galactic citizens. She was a small woman with graying hair and an infectious enthusiasm. "One of the most important things to understand about humans," she was saying, "is that we are walking contradictions. We are simultaneously the most violent and most peaceful species we know. We have committed terrible atrocities, but we have also created breathtaking beauty. We can destroy or create with equal passion. A young Pendari in the audience spoke up, her feathers ruffling with curiosity. How do you reconcile these contradictions? Dr. Yan smiled. We don't, really. We accept them. We acknowledge that humans are capable of both great good and terrible evil, and we choose every day which path to follow. That's what our isolation was about. We needed time to choose the better path, to build institutions and cultures that would keep our darker impulses in check. She displayed images of Earth, beautiful and green and alive. This is our home. We almost destroyed it several times in our history. Wars, pollution, climate change, nuclear weapons. We came so close to extinction that we developed a species-wide survival instinct. Never again, we said, and we meant it. More images appeared showing human cities that blended nature and technology. Space stations designed with gardens and parks. Ships built with crew comfort as a primary consideration. When we went to space, we brought that philosophy with us. We build for survival, yes, but also for beauty, for comfort, for the pure joy of creation. We are warriors when we must be, but we prefer to be explorers, artists, scientists, friends. Back in his office later that evening, Thexhiller met with the Inner Council, a smaller group of senior representatives who made the most critical decisions. The mood was cautiously optimistic but tinged with uncertainty. The technology transfers have begun, reported a Morphid counselor. Human engineers are working with our teams on shield enhancements, weapon systems, and propulsion upgrades. The improvements are significant. There's been an incident on Kelthera Prime, another counselor mentioned, his tone worried. A protest against human presence. Some citizens believe we're becoming too dependent on one species. Thexhiller nodded. He had expected this. Fear is natural. We've seen what humans can do when they fight. It's only reasonable that some would worry about their intentions. Captain Chen has requested a formal address to the full Galactic Council, Dr. Melsina said. She wants to clarify humanity's position and propose a formal alliance structure. Schedule it, Thexhiller decided. The sooner we establish clear parameters for this relationship, the better. That night, alone in his quarters, Thexhiller stood by the observation window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, humanity had spent 400 years preparing for threats the rest of the galaxy had tried to ignore. They had isolated themselves, devoted every resource to becoming strong enough to survive. And they had succeeded beyond any reasonable expectation. But what struck Thexhiller most was not their strength. It was their restraint. They could have returned as conquerors, demanding submission from species that could not hope to match their military might. Instead, they offered partnership. They could have kept their knowledge secret, maintaining their advantage. Instead, they were sharing freely, teaching anyone willing to learn. Perhaps that was the real lesson of the 4 minutes at Calrex Station. Not that humans were powerful, though they certainly were, but that they were powerful and chose not to dominate. They had looked into the abyss of their own capacity for violence and decided to be something better. Thexhiller pulled up a communication channel and recorded a message to his homeworld, to the leaders who would decide his species. 3 months after the Battle of Calrex Station, the galaxy had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. The 4-minute war, as it was universally known now, had become legend. Children across 100 worlds played games reenacting the battle. Military academies completely restructured their curricula. Trade routes shifted. Political alliances reformed. And at the center of it all, humanity stood as both savior and enigma. The Grand Council chamber of Calrex Station was filled to capacity. Representatives from 43 civilizations had gathered, more than double the usual attendance. They came to witness history, the formal signing of the Treaty of Calrex, which would establish the Galactic Defense Initiative and humanity's role within it. Ambassador Thexhiller stood at the podium, looking out at the assembled delegates. 3 months ago, he had believed his civilization was about to die. Now he was helping to forge an alliance that might define the galaxy's future for millennia. The Treaty of Calrex represents more than a military alliance, he began, his voice steady and clear. It represents a fundamental shift in how we approach our collective security. We acknowledge that the galaxy contains threats beyond any single civilization's ability to counter. We acknowledge that isolation and wishful thinking are not strategies, and we acknowledge that humanity's 400 years of preparation have provided them with knowledge and capabilities that we desperately need. He paused, making eye contact with various delegates. But this treaty also establishes protections and limitations. Humanity will not command the Galactic Defense Initiative. They will advise, train, and fight alongside us. But decision-making authority rests with the Council. No single species, no matter how powerful, will dominate galactic affairs. Captain Sarah Chen sat in the observer section, wearing her dress uniform, a formal version of the practical attire she preferred. She had been promoted to admiral after the battle, though she insisted everyone still call her captain. Around her sat other human representatives, diplomats, scientists, military officers, all carefully chosen for their ability to build bridges between humanity and the galactic community. The treaty was signed without incident, each delegate adding their species seal to the holographic document. When it was done, when the cheering had subsided, Captain Chen was invited to speak. She walked to the podium with her characteristic calm confidence. 3 months of intense diplomacy had not changed her fundamental nature. She was still a warrior, but she had proven to be a diplomat as well. Thank you, Ambassador Thexalar, and thank you to all the representatives who have worked so hard on this treaty, she began. 3 months ago, we revealed ourselves to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. Some of you celebrated, some feared us, some still do, and that's okay. Healthy skepticism keeps everyone honest, she smiled slightly. But I want to be clear about something. Humanity didn't spend 400 years preparing for war because we love fighting. We did it because we love survival. We looked at the threats in this galaxy and decided we would rather be overprepared than extinct. That's not aggression. That's caution taken to an extreme level. A Keltharian delegate raised a crystalline appendage. Admiral Chen, some of our citizens worry that humanity's military superiority will lead inevitably to dominance. How can you guarantee this won't happen? I can't, Chen answered honestly, and the room stirred with surprise at her bluntness. I can't guarantee anything. Humanity has a mixed history, just like every species. We've had dictators and democracies, wars and peace, wisdom and foolishness. What I can tell you is that we've built safeguards. Our government requires consensus, our military answers to civilian authority, and most importantly, we remember our mistakes. She activated a holographic display showing images from Earth's history, battlefields, devastated cities, memorials. We remember what happens when power is abused. We remember the cost of tyranny. These memories keep us careful, keep us humble, keep us constantly questioning our own motives. Dr. Melsina stood from her seat. May I ask a question, Admiral? Of course, Doctor. You mentioned something when we first met about a threat from the Galactic Core. Something that awakened the Vryn. Can you elaborate? The room went quiet. This was the question everyone wanted answered but had been too afraid to ask. Shen's expression grew serious. I can, and I think it's time the galaxy knew the full truth. She changed the display, showing astronomical data. Our deep space monitoring arrays have detected anomalies in the Galactic Core for the past 70 years. Energy signatures that don't match any known natural phenomenon, gravitational distortions, quantum fluctuations. 3 years ago, these anomalies began moving. The display showed trajectory predictions, spreading out from the galactic core like cracks in ice. Whatever's at the center of these anomalies, it's ancient. We're talking millions of years old, and it's waking up. The Vryn weren't just random activation. They were sent, directed. Someone or something wanted to test the galaxy's defenses. A Morphid counselor spoke up, his gelatinous form rippling with anxiety. Test them for what purpose? We don't know, Chen admitted. But based on the energy readings, whatever activated the Vryn is orders of magnitude more powerful than they were. The Vryn were reconnaissance. What comes next will be the actual threat. Fear rippled through the chamber. Commander Zilrith, who had been standing at the back, moved forward. The past 3 months had changed him. He wore a human-designed uniform now, having accepted a position as Joint Tactical Coordinator. His scales showed colors that indicated both confidence and readiness, which is why the Galactic Defense Initiative is so critical, Zilrith said. We have perhaps 2 years, maybe less, before the core anomalies reach the outer spiral arms. 2 years to prepare, 2 years to transform our defensive capabilities, 2 years to learn everything humanity can teach us. Chen nodded. Commander Zilrith is correct. The treaty we signed today isn't just about cooperation. It's about survival. We need to pool our knowledge, our resources, our thinking, Humanity brings military doctrine and technology, yes, but we need your contributions too. Your understanding of alien physics, your bioengineering capabilities, your computational power. Together we might stand a chance. A young human woman stood from the observer section. Thexelar recognized her as Dr. Yan Wei, the xenoanthropologist who had been conducting cultural exchanges. Chen gestured for her to speak. If I may add something, Dr. Yan said, I think we've been focusing too much on humanity's military capabilities and not enough on why those capabilities exist. Humans aren't good at war because we're inherently violent. We're good at war because we're good at solving problems, any problems, and we approach warfare the same way we approach everything else, with creativity, determination, and a refusal to accept failure. She smiled warmly at the assembled delegates. Give us a scientific puzzle, we'll solve it. Give us an engineering challenge, we'll overcome it. Give us a threat to our survival, we'll prepare for it with obsessive thoroughness. That's what you're really getting with this alliance. Not just weapons and tactics, but a species that refuses to give up. That always looks for another angle, another approach, another solution. The session continued for several more hours, with delegates asking questions and receiving detailed answers about defense preparations, technology sharing, and the timeline for the approaching threat. When it finally ended, Thexelar felt both exhausted and energized. That evening, he met Chen in one of the station's observation lounges, a quiet space with large windows overlooking the stars. She was out of uniform now, wearing simple civilian clothes, nursing a cup of coffee, a human beverage that had become surprisingly popular among Galactic citizens. How do you think it went? Thexelar asked, accepting the cup of tea she had ordered for him. Better than expected, Chen replied. Fear is natural, but so is hope. The galaxy is choosing hope, choosing to prepare rather than panic. That's all we can ask for. Tell me honestly, Captain, what are our chances? Chen was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the stars. If we had faced this threat alone, humanity included, I'd say 20%. Maybe less. But together, with every species contributing their unique perspective? Maybe 50-50. Maybe better. Those aren't great odds. No, Chen agreed. But they're better than zero, which is what we'd have without cooperation. She turned to face him. Ambassador, humanity learned something important during our isolation. We learned that preparing for the worst doesn't mean giving in to fear. It means taking control of your fate. The galaxy has been passive for too long, hoping threats would stay dormant. That ends now. Thexelar sipped his tea, considering her words. Your species fascinates me, Captain. You spent 400 years preparing for war, yet you seem to want it least of all. Because we know what it costs, Chen said quietly. Every human child learns about our history, the wars we fought among ourselves, the millions who died. We know that war is not glorious. It's tragic, wasteful, horrifying. We prepare for it so thoroughly precisely because we never want to need those preparations.